Aiming the audience to start things off. So how's that going? Hey, can we just hit the hard reset button together, shall we? Do you want to do something together really quick? I want you guys to just sit comfortably, both feet on the floor, which is not how you're supposed to do things all the time, but both feet on the floor, relax your shoulders. If you feel like it, maybe open up your hands to God here, just to be ready to receive what God has for you today in His Word. You can close your eyes if you want. You can read along with me if that's your flavor, but check this out in James 4. And just recognize that God has something for you today in His Word, from His Spirit. It says, now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. It's James 4, 13 through 15. I want you to be asking that question today as we dig into God's Word. What is my life? What is the sum total of it? What are the important pieces that build up the kind of person that I am and that I'm becoming? What is my life? Come on, Josh. We're in a series, because we're always in a series, called Generous God, Generous People. Amen. And I love this in November. It just feels right to talk about how good God is and how much He's given us, and how that goodness should now pour into our own generosity. Our generosity is not a work that we do, but it's a reaction almost. It's a response to the goodness and generosity of God. And to that end, Elias kicked us off by speaking to God's generosity in a really beautiful way, that God provides for flowers and for birds, so chill. He's got you. It's a beautiful, beautiful thought. We had our friend Jimmy Allen come in. He talked about contentment. He had props. Good stuff. I encourage you to go back and listen to Jimmy's sermon. And then, personal favorite, no knock on you, personal favorite, Al Kingen, I felt like last week did such a phenomenal job. I took copious notes. And I think personally, just for me, the best teaching on the parable of the shrewd manager I've ever heard. Like, oh, this parable makes sense now. I get why Jesus said these things. So really powerful stuff. Before I tell you the title of my lesson today, I'm just gonna reveal the whole thing. Is that fine? Because then if you really don't want to be here, you can go. I'm just going to tell you exactly what I'm going to do and why I want to do it. My actual goal today is to cultivate a holy discontentment in this room. I want you to walk out of this room dissatisfied, maybe a little angry, maybe ready to break something. I've been listening to punk rock all week, and it's been something for me. I want to inspire a rebelliousness, a restlessness, a civil disobedience in this room. I don't want the cops called necessarily, but if they were called, it wouldn't be the worst outcome. My goal is not guilt or shame. Guilt and shame are going to want a seat at the table during this lesson, but I encourage you to just kind of leave them at the door, if that's okay. Honestly, I want to carve a pit in our stomachs about our own relationship to wealth. I want you to walk out of this room really curious about what the week has in store for you and your bank account and your stuff. Sound fun? Sound good? Title of the lesson today, generosity as an act of resistance. If you feel the urge at any point during this lesson to like stomp or punch something or go hard, then I might be doing my job correctly. Generosity as an act of resistance, an act of rebellion. And you might be like, Josh, that makes absolutely no sense. All of the character traits that I associate with generosity have nothing to do with disobedience or resistance. But I'm going to tell you, in the way of Jesus, there is nothing more radical, more dangerous for the powers that be than to be a generous person. Yeah. If you are a truly generous person, the way that the world works will not like you. Yeah. But that's kind of the point. So let's just dig into it, shall we? What is there to resist? Well, here's the world that we live in. We live in a world of drone-powered same-day shipping, instant coffee, targeted advertisement algorithms, mega-church lifestyle blogs, meditation apps, Taco Bell, loyalty, rewards, points. We live in a world of pop art that is neither popular nor artistic. We live in a world where you can sports gamble on D3 field hockey. Yeah. And they're going to give you a $100 signing bonus just for showing up. Thanks, FanDuel. This sermon's sponsored by FanDuel. We live in a world of size zero runways, and a $20 billion porn industry. We live in a world of cinematic universes that want all of your time, all of your attention, all of your money. And in this actual world that we live in, Jesus calls us to be set apart, to be content, to be in the world but not of the world, to be happy people. But this is the air that we breathe in. And there's a certain point where we have to look at ourselves and go, this is insane. This is not how people were meant to live. We have been trained beautifully to become turbo consumers. I was watching, Allie and I like to watch like shows about tiny houses and stuff. I don't know. We're simple people. We need little, right? But there's a show we were watching about this group of tiny house, like real estate. I don't even know what it is. But they're building this like little resort of tiny houses. And this guy, in praise of one of his workers, is like, that's a super producer. And there was like a super producer. Like, we've lived in this world of production and consumption to such a degree that that's now like a compliment. Of like, yeah, this person creates a lot of value for me. There's something about this list, something about the world that we live in that is just stinky. That is just a little bit gross. The problem is the promises of material wealth probably aren't that oppressive to you. You might look at some of the things on this list and you're like, yeah, that was me this week. I bet on Amherst College, D3 women's field hockey, made $60. Like, I don't know what's going on in your world, but this stuff might not seem that weird to you. Maybe you've seen every Marvel film, and that's fine. That's entertainment, right? But there's something that happens when I start to live in a cinematic universe. When I am now a player in the cinematic universe, and my consumption and my accumulation start to define my identity. I note 3 Western postures towards all this nonsense. You might just buy in. And if that's you today, that's fine. Jesus includes you too. That's okay. Like, there's a sense that it's all about the Benjamins, and I understand the power and the value of money, and so, great, I'm going to play the game. Sounds good to me. My goal in life is to gain and to get more, and so you seek money, because money promises to fix your problems and change your status. Maybe if you get enough money, things will change. Things will be better. Suddenly, people will see you differently, right? The other side, and I see this more in my generation, is this kind of like hollow, empty resistance, where you have an Occupy Wall Street sticker on your brand new MacBook Pro. Like, you're in a march or a protest, but you're wearing brand new Patagonia, and your shoes are worth $300, and you're like, we gotta tear down the capitalist system. Like, I don't know. You seem like you're kind of into it. Or maybe, and this is probably the one that you find yourself in today as a Christian, is that you kind of just don't think about it. Like, you understand that money has value and that you got to have some of it because you got to pay the bills, but you just don't think about your stuff or your money that much. I get mine. I don't preoccupy myself with the big picture stuff, and I'm just going to take care of me and my family, and that's okay. I don't have to worry about the big picture stuff. I'm in the world. I'm not of the world, right? And that seems safe, but that actually does nothing to resist the powers that be. And to function and thrive in a system like this does make me complicit in it. Yeah. That I don't have to like any of these things in order to participate in them, to be part of it, and to quietly, silently approve of them. I'm sure if you look at this list, you're like, I'm a disciple of Jesus. I would never. My, right? But we all participate. You probably have social media, right? I do, right? You have an Amazon wish list. So do I. You're going out for Black Friday. I'm probably not going to, but Cyber Monday, right? Oh, but Giving Tuesday, after Cyber Monday, right? That's how it's supposed to work. We live in a world of stuff. This is insane. So you can stick your head in the sand, or you can put your sticker on your MacBook Pro, or you could buy into all of it. But these tsunami waves of accumulation and materialism and greed and getting and more, they're not going away. This isn't changing. And so if this isn't going to change, we're probably going to have to change a little bit. If we want to live, I love what Barry said, live according to God's intention for our lives. This culture demands to be met with a resistance. This culture is asking to be fought back with. A counterculture of generosity, of contentment, and of joy. A counterculture that says, I have enough and I'm not looking for more. I actually like the life that I have, and I have more than I need, and so instead of accumulating for myself, I'm going to start giving things away in a potentially reckless way. This is how we fight back. Ask yourself, what could the world possibly do with people who refuse to play the game? If you walk out of this door and you just refuse to participate, you refuse to get the bigger house, the nicer car, the electric-powered dog polisher, whatever it is, the thing on your list, right? If you just refuse to do that, what can the world do to you at this point? How does the world respond to a community that finds another way to win? What could your joy, your contentment, your generosity shine a light on in this world? What might it say to the world outside about the way that we're living? We got to look at some scripture. Check out Luke 12 in verse 13. Jesus speaks to money, I think, more than any other topic in the Gospels. More than love and marriage, more than evangelism, more than so many other very important and good things. He talks about money, and I think there's a reason for that. Luke 12, verse 13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Interesting. Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out! Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Who here understands that in their brain? Yeah, okay, I know that stuff isn't going to make me happy. Because you got told that by a Disney movie at some point. Like, it's not about stuff, but hey, buy the toy from this movie. Right? Okay, thank you, Walt, right? Something should stand out to you here, not just because I highlighted it in red. This phrase, all kinds of greed. That stuck out to me as I was preparing this. All kinds of greed. Like, I only know the one kind of greed, right? It's Scrooge McDuck diving into a pile of coins, bathing in them, which probably seems super gross. Like, as an adult, I'm like, I don't want to do that. It seems dangerous and bad. All kinds of greed, but this is the trick that Satan plays on us, straight up. He says, oh no, there's just that one kind of greed. And so if you're not fabulously wealthy, you're doing fine. If you're not Scrooge McDuck, then you're actually okay. Greed and materialism mask themselves in so many ways so that we can crave stuff and crave accumulation and build our identity on these things with zero guilt and zero self-awareness. Yeah, wow. You might be becoming this person without even realizing it. And we're having a lot of fun here this Sunday morning, aren't we? Here are some kinds of greed that I dealt with in the last 2 weeks. The Scrooge McDuck thing, yeah. I have a pile of coins in my attic, and every once in a while I just kind of roll around. It feels great. No, that's not me. But I have felt greedy for attention, validation. Hey, you know, you're doing a really good job. You know, there's something special about you. Maybe your type of greed is sociopathic bargain hunting. Because it's not just enough to get the deal. You have to have a story about the deal that you got, so when you wear the new thing, you go, you're not going to believe how cheap. Hey, Rachel? No. There's a different line in the notes for Rachel. Don't worry. And maybe other people. Maybe your type of greed is that you have to have the latest, the smartest, and the most efficient everything, right? Your dishwasher has an app. Like, it connects to my watch. Like, what are we doing here, folks? Maybe okay, this is one that I've had to deal with for a long time, especially in college, that you dress not with really expensive clothes, but you dress in such a way as to appear wealthy so that people who see you think that you have a higher status than you are because you associate a certain kind of dress with a certain level of personal value. Right. Well, if I just look this way, people will know that I'm doing all right. Maybe your type of greed is just one more episode, one more swipe, one more scroll, one more targeted ad towards you. I said the word kettlebell, and then I started getting kettlebell ads, and I was like, stop listening. Maybe your greed, this one came up for me in the last 2 weeks, some of you guys know, a ruthless competitiveness. Because it's not enough to win family board game night, you have to dominate. You can't just win the fantasy football trade, the other person has to suffer, right? Surely not I, Lord. Maybe it's a nonstop need to tweak and alter and improve your life so that there's always a fix, and it can always be a little bit better, and so you're never quite happy. Maybe it's checking your bank account 5, 6, 7 times a day to make sure that the check cleared. I have to make sure. What's the number? That could be rich or poor, by the way. You could have $0 in there or $1 million, and that could be a thing for you. Maybe your greed is for a cultural resonance and a social currency. That everyone knows that I've seen every show, and I've heard every album, and I'm on the up and up. I'm in the culture. Not of it, but I'm in it, right? Maybe it's an inability to sit in traffic and just stop for 5 minutes. Maybe it's a greed for rightness and correctness. That you have to have the smartest point at every dinner party. And actually, you see, the oil pipelines are really, thank you for coming. You brought potatoes. Is that garlic in the potatoes? Let's just move on. All of these things are greed. And this is a short list of things that I had to deal with in the last couple of weeks. I'm sure that if I really put pedal to the metal, I could find a few more. Maybe you can too. Here is the honest truth. A people who worship wealth can and will be controlled by that wealth. If you worship wealth, even if you don't mean to, you can be controlled by that wealth. And that's the way the game is played. That you aren't enough unless you drive a certain type of car of a certain year. And so all of your attention, all of your focus, all of your time, all your money goes towards getting that thing, because by the time you've gotten it, there'll be something better. And we stay on the treadmill. We're hamsters on the wheel, baby. We're caught in the trap, and we love it. People who worship wealth can and will be controlled by wealth. And you might not recognize that it's happening, by the way. Right. You might not realize this is what's going on in your life. And I know that I'm teetering into like X-Files conspiracy theory here, of like, and you have to understand that the system is like, but I promise you there is a non-violent takeover happening in real time. Yeah, that's right. You may not feel it in here, but the enemy is at the gates. Yeah. And he wants in. The three enemies, right? It's the world, the flesh, and the devil. And these three combine to form sort of a Voltron called greed, called accumulation. Some of you guys weren't born in the 80s and you don't remember Voltron. That's okay. That's fine. I wasn't either. The takeover is happening. It's already happened, and we let him in, guys. We let him in every time we turn on the screen. We let him in every time we turn on the radio. He's right there, and he wants a piece of you. And what I'm worried about is that these oppressive forces of accumulation and materialism and greed have so radically changed our hearts already that the point of this sermon's already too late. That I'm showing up to a city that's already burning. Guys, the enemy's coming. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. You don't have to do this if you want to, but I had it in the notes. If you just think for a second about the net worth of everything that's on your person right now, it's a larger number than you think. And you're like, oh, no. Because I have devices. My belt is from, and my shoes. You have to understand, everybody in this room is living at a higher quality of life right now than Julius Caesar. Right. Yeah. Like, but Julius Caesar didn't have to go to work. Yes, he did. But like, listen, like, we are doing so well and we don't even realize it. Yeah. And so we're in response to all this, in response to all kinds of greed, Jesus does what he does. He tells a story. Here in Luke 12, verse 16. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns, build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you've got plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Wow. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? This is how it's going to be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. Wow. He doesn't say this could happen to you. He says this is how it's going to be for anyone who stores up things for themselves and is not rich towards God. This is a deeply unnerving parable. Yeah. And for this audience here, this is kind of a crass thing to say. Like, you know how being rich makes you valuable? None of it works out for you. Like, this is a group of people who are living hand to mouth. This crowd is almost certainly across the board living below the poverty line. What's the one thing that they're constantly thinking about? Having enough. He says this guy got more than enough and it didn't work out for him. So why do you want all that stuff? Why do you want all that money? This is something that should prick and scare us to a degree. Imagine if your dream life was used as the example of what God condemns. What if everything you wanted are the exact things that God didn't want for your life? And you go, oh, boy. You gotta understand, most of the people in this audience will never even be in the same zip code as this kind of wealth. And it's actually a bad thing. Well, this man falls victim to the same dangers that we face. Dangers of ingratitude, accumulation, and self-centeredness. This is on the table for us too. Quick word on each. Ingratitude. It says that the ground of a certain rich man yielded the harvest. It doesn't say anything about the work that the man did. It didn't say that he grew the crops, right? And we know this enough about farming, that the ground is what yields the harvest. And so even if he's an awesome farmer, there's nothing in the parable about gratitude, thanking God for what God has done on his land, taking a moment to praise and to worship. It never shows up. Because farming, like most work, is mostly out of our control, including your stuff as well. The things you have, the money that you have, it's mostly out of your control, if we're being completely honest. And yet he jumps at an opportunity to seize control of the situation. I've fallen into some good times. What shall I do? Rather than what has God done for me? Ingratitude is at the juicy center of this entire mess. Second problem, verse 18, is accumulation. He says, bigger, more, higher, to the right. It's the world that we live in, right? I'll make more storage and more stuff and more and more and more. He's planning parties for himself years in advance. That's crazy. And he never has a single thought like, is this maybe too much? Am I overdoing it? Not that we've ever had that thought before either. Maybe I have too much stuff, said no one ever. And the last part, verse 19, the scariest part to me, he says to himself, yada, yada, yada. And this is maybe the most insidious one, because I can convince myself that I don't have enough. Yeah. I can convince myself that I am the best financial advisor who ever lived. Well, I was smart enough to get the money. I was smart enough to keep the money, so I must be doing something right. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? He assumes that his good fortune makes him an expert. He assumes that because the ground yielded crops, God must be with me and I must be doing something right. Jesus says, you fool, don't you realize the trap that you set yourself in? And so these things might seem extreme or distant. You might feel like I'm not preaching to you. Congratulations for that. I promise you these things are not distant for us. Whether you consider yourself to be rich or poor, whether you consider yourself to have too much or not enough, we leap to spend money faster than we acquire it, don't we? We are looking for something to spend our money on. We drive home from work angry at our bosses rather than grateful to God for our paychecks. We rent storage units for all the stuff that doesn't even fit inside our houses. We scroll Facebook Marketplace for things that we don't need with money that we don't have. Me too. It's free. We gather up free stuff that we don't need, and we go, but it was free. And I do it too. I live on Facebook Marketplace. I'm like, I'm just looking for a good kettlebell set that's cheap enough. And what am I doing? I got to stop. I got to pause every once in a while because I say to myself, hey, this is going pretty good. I'm making it. I'm doing it. And I just continue with zero thought about the needs of others or the will of God. I just keep going. I keep participating. I keep showing up for the flea market, so to speak. Moreover, I don't have time for it. I'm just going to breeze through it. Luke 11:37, you can take a picture, write it down. All of the stuff that Jesus is saying is in response to an interaction he has with a group of people called the Pharisees. These are religious elites. And for the most part, they were fairly wealthy. And something happens at this dinner party that sets Jesus off. And he goes on like a 3-page tirade against wealth and accumulation. And it's awesome. It's like the most punk rock thing Jesus does. Like imagine Jesus left your house and then just gathered a crowd and started explaining how bad it is in there. It's like, come on, Jesus, let's go. It's awesome stuff. Yeah. But he's warning them that even the most religious people can fall victim to this threat. Maybe that's why Jesus speaks on money more than anything else. Ultimately, the way of the kingdom stands utterly at odds with oppressive accumulation. I cannot live with the intention that God has for my life and get all the stuff that I want, and see the numbers keep going up and up and up, and get my identity from wealth, and wear the Patagucci, and I can't have this and that. And at a certain point, I have to make a decision. I think what Jesus is getting at in this parable is that a heart oppressed by greed, not just obsessed, but oppressed by wealth, will never understand kingdom generosity. It just won't click for you. If my world is here, then I will never understand that. Free game for you. Free thought. If the things in this world do satisfy you this morning, if you're like, I have enough stuff and I love my stuff, what is there going to be in heaven for you? Because you probably also want to go to heaven. That seems pretty nice too. But if all the stuff that I like is right here and right now, what's there going to be in heaven for me that is of any interest at all? That's not even in this. That's just like a scary thing I was thinking about when I was driving alone in my car late at night. Jesus gives us a different way of being human. Always. In everything that he teaches, he says there's another way. You don't have to live in this system. And he calls it being rich towards God. He says, woe for you if you are not rich towards God. What does it mean to be rich towards God? I think it means to be abundant in the things that God values. To be abundant in spirit. To be abundant in character, in hope, and in relationships. To be full of these things so that the outside world cannot touch me. And Paul describes it here in 1 Timothy chapter 6. He says a lot about wealth in 1 Timothy chapter 6. This is just a snippet. That's a hint to go back and look at it. I know you guys will do it. You guys are awesome about that stuff. It says, command those who are rich in this present world, that's everybody in this room, not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Not just having the stuff, but enjoying it too. To enjoy your life. He says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Bask in that wordplay for a second. The life that is truly life. He says to be rich towards God does not demand poverty. Jesus never glamorizes poverty in the Gospels. He says instead to be rich towards God is to have a childlike reliance on God's provision. A complete trust that God is providing and will continue to do what he said he was going to do. And that his generosity, as we've outlined in this whole series, God's goodness and generosity will inspire our good deeds and our own generosity and our own willingness to share. He says that people who are rich towards God will interact with the world's oppressive forces with a renewed and rebellious spirit. He says in the face of incalculable greed, they will start giving things away. They'll live simply. They'll be hospitable. They'll be reckless, not reckless, but generous with their money in a way that seems reckless to the world at large. They will become immune to advertisement. They'll be bored with celebrity and trends and fashion. They won't compare, they cannot be bought, and they cannot be distracted. That is who you are called to be in the way of Jesus. The game has no effect on me. I would love to say that someday. It currently has very much of an effect on me. I'm distractible. I get enticed with gossip and fashion and trends. I compare myself to anybody and everybody, and I'm fighting these things in myself, but I need help. I need work from the Spirit to happen in my heart. And so the goal for us is like, want money less. Get out there, folks. Go want money less. That's not a very good practical. The goal, it's easy to say, but it's hard to cultivate. I've been sharing this with the campus a good bit. There's a gap between the person that I am right now and the person that God is calling me to be. And I cannot possibly clear that gap under my own willpower. I keep trying to jump the Grand Canyon, and I keep landing flat on my face. And so I need something extra Joshical, something supernatural, if you will. I need to invite the Spirit into my life so that He will transform my heart and my being. A few ways to cultivate this generous spirit. Just maybe something on this list speaks to you. Simplicity. Not like a minimalist aesthetic, but genuinely just having what you need. And no more. Reducing your stuff. I did this last week. I deleted every app that I don't use. It was like, it was amazing. Like, I really encourage you guys to do it. It means fewer subscriptions, fewer pairs of shoes. Allie and I try to practice a one in, one out practice. I need to buy a new jacket because this one has a hole. So one comes in, one goes out. New pair of shoes, one comes in, one goes out. We're trying to do this for Miles, but it's hard because people really love him and love to give him stuff. And it's very kind, and we love that, and you guys are awesome. But we're trying to even teach him this, that, hey, you have more than enough. So if you see an advertisement on TV, don't get swayed. It's hard. It's hard to do. Service is a very, very challenging and outward-oriented way to fixate my desires on real needs. I want to help people who actually have problems rather than my first world problems. It's difficult, but it can be done. Fasting with caution and with advice is a way to tangibly stoke my craving for God. My body wants food, and my spirit wants God. That's kind of the hope there. I encourage you, if you're curious about fasting, do a lot of research, but it's purposefully weakening our body to open up our spirit. It's a really beautiful practice. Giving. As we've talked about quite a bit, giving consistently and sacrificially, it keeps our attention on God's generosity rather than what we don't have. Yeah, that's what we do when we give each Sunday, even if it's just an app for you. Hopefully there's a moment where you go, God has been good to me, and that's why I can do this. It's not why I have to do this. It's why I get to do this. That's why we give each week. And we talk about giving so much. And lastly, worship. Again, it's all about attention and gratitude. I want to urge you, if you struggle to worship, if worship is something that's just always been sticky for you, what does get your attention? What does get your gratitude? Consider those things when we worship. You're practicing these disciplines. It's not about doing more God stuff, although it does feel that way sometimes. It might actually be about doing less, but inviting the Spirit into the few things that you are doing. It's about intentionally cultivating a generous spirit so that I can imitate God's generosity towards me. He's invited himself into my life in a million different ways, and these are ways that I can now invite him in to my life. And the real reward, as we close out here, is back in Luke 12. At the end of all of this talk about money and generosity and giving and having and needing, Jesus says, do not be afraid. Which he could have probably stopped there. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased. He likes doing this, to give you the kingdom. So sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, and treasure in heaven, sky treasure, as I was talking about, that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The real reward is treasure that does not wear out or fade out, and true security for your heart. Who else can promise that? Right. Who else can offer you actual peace that cannot be touched? And you get to participate in the process. He doesn't just give it to you, he invites you in and you get to walk through that doorway. He calls us to be a people who are unconquerable by this world. People who cannot be bored or distracted, who flat out reject materialism and greed and carve out a new way of being human together. a new way of living, a way of generosity and self-sacrifice and radical trust in God's provision. Because we trust God, we can give it all away. And we pose a threat. This is where it gets dangerous. This is where the civil disobedience comes in. We pose a threat to the powers that be. People who live this way need to get stamped out, according to the world. We can't have generous people around. They'll upset everything. They'll ruin it for all of us who are trying to have it all. We pose a threat to the powers that be because we expose this failing system of accumulation for what it is. It's a dying empire, guys. Having it all, having a 6-car garage, having the house that's bigger than the house, and then having the back house, the in-ground pool, it's going away. It's fading. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but in God's timeline, these things will not win out. So don't choose them, and don't put your hope in them. Let us be a people who are rich towards God, who are living the life that is truly life, people who have aggressively accumulated joy, who have aggressively accumulated peace and contentment and have no problem rebuking greed and materialism when they see it. Not just in other people, but in their own hearts. Let us be rebels. Let us be resistors and rabble-rousers for the Lord. People who cause a problem out there. Not with words, not with programs, not with politics, but with contentment, with generosity, with self-sacrifice, and with worship. Thank you for your time. I love you guys. Grace and peace to you.